I get a lot of comments on how the Patrol looks and how it sounds, but most people don't realise the effort and the work that went into it to get here. So this is the story about my Patrol. So when I first bought the Patrol, it was just standard stock diesel, no lift, no nothing. And I honestly didn't have any big plans of building it into this massive rig. I just wanted something that was capable that I could go touring around with. But like most builds, once you start something, it never really stops. Like everyone does when they first get a Patrol, I started modifying it pretty quick. It's just the usual stuff like the tyres, lift and exhaust. This is where most people make their first mistake, including me. Because when you start building a car, most people think that it's about parts. It's actually about how those parts work together. I've wasted money on parts, bought parts twice, and I've learned all these lessons the hard way. And those lessons, they're what led to the biggest decision that I had to make with this Patrol. After 2 turbos and a Tillix valve and the issues that I had, I decided the LS swap was going to be the best option. So at a certain point earlier on, I started having issues with the diesel in this thing. I ended up going through 2 different turbos, and the second turbo actually spat the fins through the motor and cooked the whole motor. So that was the reason behind deciding to go with the LS rather than rebuild the diesel. A bit of extra power, a little bit more noise and a bit of extra fun. So after putting the second turbo on this motor, I got about 400 k's up the road, and the Tillix valve blew a boost line off it, and it boosted the turbo to about 40 psi and just spat all the fins through the motor. So that was a big call in regards to why I went with the LS, was parts, reliability and just simplicity. Like, I've got other cars with LSs in them too, so having motors that are interchangeable and parts that are easily accessible, that was a big one for me. But what most people don't realise is the engine isn't actually the hard part. It's choosing all the other systems around it to match the engine. This is the part that nobody really talks about when they show their builds online. Things didn't just work perfectly straight away. There was issues all the way through this build, and stuff didn't go right. I found out pretty quick that a build like this, it'll humble you real fast. So it was after the diesel engine blew up and the turbo spat the fins through the motor that we decided to pull that motor out. I had another mate with another GU, so I gave him that motor as a spare for his because he had the old 3 litre as well. So then we went with the LS build. So we bought an LS and decided to build it, chasing low numbers, something that was going to be reliable, that I could take touring and that I wouldn't have issues with. So I've built engines before. I've done conversions and swaps, and I do all my own work on all my cars. But when it comes to building an engine, as much as I'd like to say I'm an engine builder, I'm far from it, and there's a lot better people in the world to do that. So I outsourced the building of this LS. I'm not going to mention any names, but it was a reputable engine centre apparently. So $18,000 it cost me for this LS1 to be built. We had a dyno, put it in, it was making 330, I think it was 333 at the wheels. So not a huge build, but not a bad build either. So anyway, we got the motor in, got the car all working. I took it for a drive. I actually had a skid comp with my other car, so after we did a couple of Ks in the Patrol, run the motor in, we hooked the trailer up and towed the car down to Brisbane. And it was there that we had issues. We pulled up with the Patrol and I found a big lump of oil underneath it. Climbed under and we found that it had blown the rear main seal out, and we didn't know half the issues that we had at that stage. So we ended up losing a lot of oil. I was still 200 k's from home, so we went and bought a bottle of oil and just kept topping it up every 20 minutes, and we managed to limp the car back. So after we got it back in the workshop, we began the process of tearing the motor out and pulling it down. It was a bit of a drawn out process. My mate was busy in his workshop as well, so trying to steal a hoist off him in between while he's doing other jobs, we just had to make it work. So anyway, we pulled the motor down, we stripped it. We found that the big end bearings and the main bearings were all chewed out, the cam bearings were chewed out, and a lifter had actually made contact inside the motor. So we had major issues, so I stripped it down, took the block away, got it remachined. We got another set of pistons and rods. This time decided to upgrade, so we went with some forged rods and some billet pistons, and got to give it a bit more higher compression. We went all out this time. I got another set of heads off my other car, some 243s that were port and polished, and we put those on it. We put a decent sized cam in it and then took it in for a tune and I think it was about maybe 6 to 9 months that whole process took of doing everything and waiting on machinists and mechanics and all this sort of stuff. But eventually got it back together and got it going again. And we pulled 350 at the wheels. So not a huge horsepower difference, but a lot more reliable in the sense of the strength of the internals in the motor. So a bit of a rundown on the engine and what I've actually done to it. It's just a LS1, it's a 2002 model I think it is, out of a VX. And so we've just got the standard crank. We put good bearings in there. We've got ACL race bearings in the bottom end. We've got forged rods and pistons. We got the head shaved down. We've got 243 heads, port and polished. Running a Crow cam from memory. It was like a 228, 232 or something like that anyway. It's got a little bit of a lump to it. It's not massive. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown here anyway. We're running the twin 16-inch thermo fans with an alloy shroud. So this thing, it never sees over 86 degrees. Like my fans kick in at 86 and it drops straight back to 85. Well, we're running the Marks high mount alternator kit. So I've actually upgraded this one. I've got a 215 amp alternator in here because I'm running all my camping gear and batteries and stuff in the back of the car and stereo and all that. So got a decent alternator, especially for when we're running the spotties and stuff like that. Put this 5-inch snorkel. It's a Nitefab snorkel. It's a bonnet entry. I went through a few different setups before I got to where I am, and each time I changed something, I learned something new about what works and what doesn't. And that's something most people don't realize when they plan a build. Experience is what actually teaches you, not just a parts list. The biggest turning point in building this Patrol, it wasn't buying new parts, it was understanding all of those parts and how they integrate and work together. Once I actually figured out how everything needed to work together, it changed the whole car completely. And that's something that you won't learn in forums or from parts lists. It's something you'll only learn by going through it. Every mistake that I made with this build, it's made this car what it is today. Because builds don't come together from parts, they come together from experience. The one thing people never talk about with builds like this is how much they actually cost. So here's a little bit of a breakdown. Depending on the type of LS that you get and where you get it from, whether you've already got one or whether you're buying a crate motor or what, you can be anywhere from free up to 30 grand for a motor. You can even pay more if you're going to put like a 427 or something like that. The things that you can't skimp on, you've got like your conversion parts. So I went with a Marks kit, for example, and look, it was 3 years ago now that I put the Marks kit in originally. I think it was about 10 or 15,000 all up for everything, for the whole conversion. Some of the other costs to factor in too is like your cooling system. So your radiator, your thermo fans, all of that. So I went with 2 thermo fans. I got an eBay shroud, aluminium shroud off eBay. That was like 150 bucks I think. And that thing just seals around the original ZD radiator. So I didn't go with an aftermarket radiator. I've modified the original ZD radiator so that it's got a little overflow hose and now has an overflow bottle in the top of it. So just a little bit of a cost breakdown on the actual kits that I went with from Marks. So the Marks conversion kit, it's $4,000 just for the kit. But then you've got all these other parts that come with it. So like you've got heat shielding, you've got hoses, you've got exhaust kits, you've got radiator mount kits, you've got engine mounts. Like there's so many different options and added extras that it all adds up really quick. And then you've got to factor in too, like you got to look at computers and a wiring loom, and then you've got to get a Sparky to come and wire it up for you if you're not electrical minded. And you've got tuning costs, you've got mechanic costs. Like if you can't do these things yourself, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and that's why these builds add up so fast. So if I was starting this build from scratch again, there's a few things that I would do completely different. But I wouldn't change a lot, you know, like I'd still stick with the LS1. I think that's a good setup, good motor for this platform. I'd probably still go with the GU 5-speed because I really like the 5-speed. The diff gears, so I'm running 411s. The 411s work well, but on the highway when I sit in 5th gear, I'm sitting at about 2,200 revs. I would like to drop that down a bit just for the fuel economy factor. So I'm thinking about changing my 411s to like a 4.3 or a 4.6 and try and get that little bit taller geared. And then I was looking at a Marks 4x4 reduction kit. So for the transfer case, so that way I can lower my 4-wheel driving gears but still keep the higher gears on the highway. If I could give any advice to anyone that's going to do an LS swap in their patrol, it'd be to just take your time, think about it, look at the processes and work it all out before you jump in and you start spending money. Because the last thing you want to do is be spending money twice for things you don't need. One thing people don't really talk about with their builds like this is what they actually cost. And I'm not just talking money, I'm talking about time, mistakes, and doing things twice. Because when you're learning as you go, you end up changing stuff that you thought was right, only to realize later on that it wasn't. Anyone who says that they got it perfect the first go, they either got lucky or they're not telling you the full story. But honestly, all of that was just part of the process. Because every mistake teaches you something that you can't learn any other way. If I was starting this build again from scratch, there's a couple of things that I'd do completely different. Because at the start, like most people, I was focused on parts instead of the way that they're installed and the way they work together. But at the same time, I don't really regret doing it that way, because going through it the hard way is exactly what taught me how this thing works. And that experience is worth more than any part you can buy. This patrol's not even finished yet. There's heaps more projects to go on this thing yet. So if you want to have a look, stick around.